The Grote Markt is the main market square in the historic center of Groningen. It was recently redesigned into Groningen's living room, a place to hang out and meet friends. And thus the saga of the Grote Markt began, as not everyone is happy with the new design. There are frequent battles between cyclists and pedestrians, each claiming the other does things wrong. When I had the idea for this video, I didn't think it would be 6 months in the making, but things just kept happening. While the saga of the Grote Markt is an ongoing one, there does seem to be a temporary conclusion now, so it's time for a video. First, let's have a look at the history of traffic on the Grote Markt. Groningen is an old city. In about 1500 years, it grew from a small village with some farms around a green space into the largest city in the north of the Netherlands. The Grote Markt was the center of the town from the beginning. In the 20th century, more and more traffic appeared in the narrow streets around the Grote Markt, especially in the 1960s, when car culture really took off. All this traffic could move right through the city center. This photo from 1973 shows the traffic lanes looping around the Grote Markt. There was car parking and even a bus station. And despite there being a separate cycle lane, it is still a lot of traffic squashed into a relatively small space. In the early 1970s, people started protesting the amount of cars in the city centre. The city council realized things needed to radically change to keep the city livable. In 1977, they decided to implement the traffic circulation plan. After its introduction, people could not drive their cars around the Grote Markt anymore. Cyclists, however, were still allowed to do just that. But even with the cars no longer on the Grote Markt, the bus station was still there. In 1992 it moved elsewhere. Just a few bus stops on the east side remained. The north side of the Grote Markt, where the bus station used to be, became a cycle route. This situation lasted well into the 21st century. In the early 2020s, the idea arose to make the Grote Markt a space for pedestrians to hang out. The buses that still went across the Grote Markt were seen as an intrusion on the peaceful nature of this newly envisioned square. There were also worries about the mixing of cyclists and buses in the narrow streets leading to the Grote Markt. From July 2022, the buses disappeared from the Grote Markt entirely. The redesign of the Grote Markt started in earnest in September 2022. During the whole process, cyclists were still allowed on the Grote Markt, but it slowly became clear that things were about to change for them as well. So what does the Grote Markt look like now? The redesign of the Grote Markt took almost 2 years to complete. Before, the Grote Markt was paved with cobbles laid out in a diamond pattern and a large compass rose. Other parts of the square were paved in red bricks. Now you should know that since the late 1990s, Groningen's inner city roads have been paved in yellow bricks. These now famous yellow bricks are only used for roads with lighter traffic like bicycles and pedestrians. The roads for heavy motorized traffic are still tarmacked. Even though the yellow bricks are everywhere, the use of curbs makes it clear what is a cycle lane and what a pedestrian area. The major east-west cycle route along the north side of the Grote Markt was also paved in yellow bricks. In the redesign, a lot has changed. Most of the Grote Markt is now paved in a new, darker red brick. The curbs are gone and the east side got a cluster of trees together with a new raised compass rose as seating area. A water feature appeared on the north side of the square, together with extra trees and more seating. The cycle path that ran along the north side, however, is gone. Most of the Grote Markt has now become a pedestrian area. Overall, I like the new design of the Grote Markt. The red bricks give it a more cohesive look than before, and it has become a nice place for people to hang out. As a cyclist, though, it does feel as if the Grote Markt has become the domain of the pedestrian. It's definitely less cycle-friendly than before. This is a deliberate choice that the city council made for the square, but that now gives them a bit of a headache as well. 2 major cycle routes have gone, both of them east-west. And although there is now an extra north-south route, it is invisible, making things very unclear and a challenge to everyone. People always have to get used to a new situation. This wasn't any different on the redesigned Grote Markt. But almost as soon as things were finished, in the summer of 2024, the complaints started. Pedestrians complained about cyclists going willy-nilly across the square or running them off their feet. Cyclists complained about pedestrians strolling across the designated cycle lanes and not paying any attention. And everyone was complaining about teenagers on so-called fat bikes, throttled electric mopeds, going much too fast everywhere. Let me try to make the situation a bit clearer. There are two remaining cycle routes over the Grote Markt. The first route goes north from the Oosterstraat to the Kreupelstraat. This follows the original north-south route and there seems to be less problems between cyclists and pedestrians here. I think because the new trees cut this part off from the main square, making it feel more like a road. The second route goes south, from the Oude Emmingestraat to the Gelkingerstraat. This is the new route that runs directly in front of the town hall, in a place that before was a pedestrian area. This is the invisible route that I mentioned before. Another big problem lies in the disappearance of the east-west cycle path along the north side. There are now no east-west movements allowed anymore over the Grote Markt. Cyclists are supposed to follow a diverted route via the Kwinkeplein and the Rode Weeshuisstraat. Cyclists going from the St. Janstraat towards the north have no problem following the diversion. It's quite logical for them. But cyclists wanting to go from the St. Janstraat towards the Vismarkt or towards the Gelkingerstraat don't want to make such a long detour. They used to be able to cycle along the north side of the Grote Markt or along the east and south side, but those routes are gone. Cyclists being cyclists, many of them still cycle along the north side or cycle diagonally across the Grote Markt from St. Janstraat to Gelkingerstraat. None of this is actually allowed. And if you add the new invisible north-south cycle route in front of the town hall, you can understand why pedestrians are complaining. But whatever way you look at it, there are much less possibilities for cyclists to cycle across the Grote Markt than before. This whole situation has set a lot of bad blood between pedestrians and cyclists. Pedestrians say they don't feel safe anymore on the square, and cyclists say they just want to get from A to B. I think the problem lies in the fact that the cyclists are missing their old routes, while pedestrians think the whole area belongs to them now and are not expecting cyclists. It turns out that the Grote Markt, at least along the two current cycle routes, is a so-called shared space. A shared space is an area where different road users have to mingle, get along and watch out for each other. The problem is that the situation on the Grote Markt is not clear. The two cycle routes, for instance, are badly signposted. It's a small sign on a high pole that no cyclist or pedestrian seems to notice. There was a serious information campaign in January 2025 to show cyclists and pedestrians where the allowed cycle routes were, but that doesn't seem to have helped much. People had also hoped that the police would find the cyclists going the wrong way, but the police have stated that they are not going to do that. The reason is that the situation is so unclear that a fine would not stand up in court if a cyclist challenged it. And lately politicians have asked questions in council meetings, and one of them even drew the actual cycle routes in street chalk on the square. But in reality nothing concrete seems to happen, so the saga continues. It's clear to all that this situation can't continue, as it's dangerous for all users of the square. But is there a solution? The interesting thing is that in the original plans the cycle routes were indicated by a different color bricks, but for some reason this wasn't realized. When asked about it by journalist, Councillor Philip Broeksma said he knew the design is different from what was realized, but that the council is not planning to replace the red bricks on the cycle routes. It would be too expensive. Councillor Broeksma also added that tests have shown that if you paint lines on the square to indicate the cycle routes, cyclists would see it as their space instead of shared space and go too fast. According to Councillor Broeksma, the expectation of the council is that once the Oosterstraat and Gelkingerstraat are redesigned in the next few years, the cycle situation will become clearer and cyclists take the right routes. In other words, the council will leave the situation as it is for now and wait for the next 2 or 3 years to see if the redesign of 2 streets leading to the Grote Markt will bring a solution. Personally, I don't see this working out, especially for the east-west cyclists. They will still miss their old routes, and I don't think that time will let them get used to the longer route. For the past 18 months, cyclists have still used the route along the north side of the Grote Markt and have now even forged a new diagonal route across it. My solution would be to make the situation clear for all users. Make sure on the ground that the cyclists know where the official cycle routes are, but in such a way that pedestrians also know. For example, in Haren, at the Raadhuisplein, they made the cycle route across the square in the same bricks, but putting it at a slightly deeper level. This makes it clear for everyone where the cycle route is. Another thing I would do is reopen the original cycle route along the north side. There will still be enough space for pedestrians to hang out. I understand that the council wants the Grote Markt to be Groningen's living room, but all but banning cyclists from the square is not going to work. Having said all that, let's not forget that the City Council of Groningen does do a lot of things right with regards to cycling infrastructure. They build special cycle parking garages and amazing connected cycle routes and other cycling infrastructure. But making it difficult for cyclists to cross the Grote Markt seems ill-advised. I think the Grote Markt can still be a place for people to hang out and meet friends, but cyclists should be a part of that as well. So the saga of the Grote Markt continues. In the meantime, we will all have to exist together, cyclists and pedestrians. But a little more help from the council would be nice. People simply need guidance sometimes. If you leave them to their own devices, they will do what they want and things might not work out for the best. Somehow I think this is not my last video about the Grote Markt. If you want to see some of that amazing cycling infrastructure, check out this video I made about Groningen's newest cycle tunnel. And don't forget to keep cycling.